I'm over 40 now in the second half of my life, and whether true or not, I consciously believe that. And what I'm acutely aware of is that one of my deepest regrets is that in the first 40 years of my life, I was not more intentional. You can sort of write off the first 20, you're a kid, you're growing up, you're a teenager, you're trying to figure out who you are. But definitely, I wish I was more intentional um, in my late 20s and 30s. And I think a big part of not being intentional was I never spent enough time truly trying to figure out what is it that I want? What is the life that I want to build? Who am I? What do I want? What do I want to achieve? Who is Ndulu Tuli? Not what ambitions have I inherited from family, friends, society, that if I do those things, then society gives me a pat in the back and says you're doing well. What life do I want to build intentionally for me, not for applause, not for external acknowledgement, but for me? And that's a big part of something that I'm trying to cultivate and build in the second half of my life. And a big part of that has been going back to reading, and more specifically, reading more philosophy. Truly, if I cannot recommend enough being intentional about being philosophical and reading more. And one of the things I recently read and reflected on was from Seneca, who wrote, "It's not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." And that really struck a chord with me, and it's something I think about quite often and reflect on quite often. And I think also doing what I do, working in wealth management and working with people on a daily basis, people from different walks of life, and trying to help them achieve their goals. By far, the hardest part of my job is not drafting the financial plan, it's drafting a personalized financial plan. And what I mean by that is, it is so rare to find people who are able to clearly define their own goals. Not what society tells them should be your goal if you want to show that you're successful and ambitious. Like, what are your goals? I think that is one of the hardest things for a lot of people to accurately define. And I think it's one of the reasons why so many people struggle with engaging meaningfully with financial planning, because a lot of the financial plans out there, even though they are technically correct in terms of the numbers, they are emotionally, um, they're not emotionally correct. People cannot engage emotionally with the financial plan because the goals are not theirs, they are inherited. And it's something I've seen a lot. And I've noticed as I watch people move through this modern life, people I'm close to, my family, my friends, my clients, people I engage with, everyone seems busy. Everyone I meet seems busy and tells me constantly how tired they are. They're ambitious, they're in motion, right? That's the modern world. But I think very few people seem deeply certain about they're about where they're actually going. Everyone's in motion, but very few people seem deeply certain about where they're actually going, what life they're trying to create. And maybe that's because modern life gives people endless things to pursue. It gives people endless things to pursue without ever forcing them to stop and ask, what is all of this for? Why am I doing all of this? Why am I spending 20, 30, 40? Why am I spending half my life, two-thirds of my life, whatever the years may be, wanting more money, more achievement, more visibility, more success. I'm not saying you shouldn't do those things. I'm saying why, to what end? And that question matters more than people realize because human beings are remarkably adaptable. Our brain can help us justify pretty much anything. We can normalize anything, no matter how meaningless or horrible something we're doing is. Our brain can help us normalize it. Long hours, stress, disconnection, emotional exhaustion, especially if society rewards us for doing those things because we are tribal beings. We want to be part of the tribe. We want to feel like we belong. We wired that way. So if society rewards us for these things, it's very easy for our brains to help us justify why we're doing something. And that's why people can spend years pursuing a goal successfully while quietly feeling further away from themselves. So externally, someone can look very successful and as if they're living a very meaningful life. But when you're engaged with that person, which I do on a regular basis, you can find someone that people admire tell you that they have never felt more disconnected from themselves than they do now. Not because those goals are wrong, not because becoming wealthier, being ambitious, pursuing success is wrong. I'm not saying those goals are wrong, but because the pursuit of those goals was never examined deeply enough. To what end? And one of the strangest things about adulthood that I've learned is, first of all, we're all just making this up. Like, no one has a plan. No one knows. No one actually has a plan. No one knows why we're all doing this. But stranger than that is that adulthood is realizing how easy it is to inherit ambitions unconsciously. And you absorb them so slowly from family, from culture, from the internet, from people around you. Because, like I said, we're tribal beings. And you start chasing things because they seem important, because the people that you admire seem to want those same things, because successful people appear to have them. And sometimes you only discover whether something truly mattered to you after sacrificing years of your life for it. And that realization for me is very unsettling because achievement and alignment are not always the same thing. Achievement and alignment, a life worth living, are not always the same thing. A person can become financially successful while being emotionally disconnected to that success. They can end up resenting their own success. They can become admired publicly while privately feeling exhausted. They can build a life that looks impressive externally while internally wondering why it doesn't feel the way that they imagined. I thought I'd be happier by now when I get that car, when I get that house, when I get that job. And I think this is happening to so many people. I speak to a lot of people. I think the saddest thing about social media is that it's forced us to always pretend like we're doing well, like we're okay. And I wish we could use it more to actually tell our social networks that I don't know what I'm doing. I'm struggling. I'm failing. Because I think this is happening to so many people. Not because they're weak or they're stupid or they're failing or anything like that, but because modern life is very good at teaching people how to perform success without teaching them how to define it carefully for themselves. And if success is never defined consciously, it usually defaults to comparison. If success is never defined consciously, it usually defaults to comparison. And that's dangerous because comparison has no finish line. If your life is defined by comparison, comparison has no finish line. You will never get to a point of satisfaction. There will always be someone who's wealthier, someone who's younger, someone who's more attractive, someone who's more accomplished, someone who's more insert here. So if your life is built around external measurement alone, peace becomes difficult to sustain. Why am I doing this? To what end? And this is why philosophy matters practically. And I suggest that more people start reflecting on their lives, start engaging with philosophy. Philosophy matters practically, not as a theory, but as protection against the modern world, protection against drifting through life unconsciously. At some point, everyone has to decide what do I actually value? What kind of life feels meaningful to me? What am I willing to sacrifice for? And equally important, what am I not willing to sacrifice for? Because every meaningful life costs something. There is no life without trade off. And the question is simply whether the trade off is conscious or not. Because whether you want to admit it, you're already doing this. The question is simply whether the trade is conscious, whether the life you're building feels deeply yours or if it's inherited from the people around you. And that's what makes this conversation so important, not because ambition is bad. Ambition is beautiful, building wealth is beautiful, mastery is beautiful, achievement is beautiful. But eventually, every intelligent person must ask a deeper question. Well, let me just say, every person must ask a deeper question. Will the life I'm building still feel meaningful once the applause disappears? Who am I doing this for? Because that question changes people. That question has changed me because it forces you to think beyond image, beyond status, beyond comparison, towards something more meaningful, something quieter, more stable, more lasting. A life built not only around achievement, but around peace, clarity, meaning, and self respect. Take the time to define what a good life actually means to you. Not what looks successful, not what gets attention, not what impresses strangers online. What genuinely feels worth giving your life to? What do you want to spend 20, 30, 40 years of your life pursuing? Because if that question is never answered intentionally, it is very easy to spend years becoming successful at things that never truly make you feel alive.